Hi, Jeff. Welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, well, we always start on this show with hearing a little bit about people's journey up until this point. And
Mm.
do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, your career, and whatever else you want to throw in there?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because the backstory is the front story all of a sudden. I mean, for me, everything goes back to San Diego State University. That's where I got my bachelor's. That's where I got my master's. I like to tell people that I attended and survived 18 consecutive semesters at San Diego State University, but I got 2 degrees out of it. I got
Nice.
met my wife there, and we're still married, and we've got 3 children, our oldest of which is a freshman there. And when I was getting my master's degree in communication, part of the backstory, right, is I started teaching classes as a graduate teaching assistant, and I got good at teaching, and I stayed in the community college district after San Diego State as an adjunct. I taught 2 or 3 classes per semester for like 20 years, and then coaching, consulting, speaking, training took off, and I was going around the world and couldn't commit to brick and mortar anymore. And then, COVID hit, wrote some books, and next thing I know, the then interim dean, Dr. Heather Canary, noticed one of my promotions for my book, The Integrity Game, a year and a half ago. And one thing led to another. And next thing I know, I'm unretired and I'm back in the classroom. So now I'm teaching some communication classes at San Diego State University. They brought me in to teach organizational communication, but now public speaking while my son is there as a freshman. And so backstory is now the current story.
Right.
And so that's an epicenter for me. I grew up, I became an adult, I learned how to be responsible in all the things at San Diego State, and yeah, of course, got the master's degree in communication, and that's been the epicenter for everything I do professionally.
What was the catalyst for you, like getting into coaching? Was that something that was always on your mind, or how did that evolve?
Well, there's the practical catalyst, and then there's the spiritual catalyst, right?
Sure.
As this is, I think that just spiritually or energetically, I think a lot of the work that we do in our lives is a product of really what we're working on ourselves. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
so one of the answers is apparently I needed it. I
Right.
needed some coaching. That's one. But there's a really cool story. This is, if you don't mind me giving a shout out to Brian Trachel. I was let's say, how should I say this? I was masquerading as a real estate professional, right? What
Okay.
happened was there was some transitional period when my wife and I had our first kid. Like, how do we want to do this? Who's going to stay home? Are we doing day? All the things you got to figure out when you're becoming a parent for the first time. And my wife's corporate, stable, steady. So, okay, I'll teach some classes. I'll be entrepreneurial. I'll get a real estate license. I'll form a C corp. I'll market myself as a consultant. We'll see what happens. And off
Sure.
we went. Off we went. So when I had my clip art business card with the clip art guy carrying a light bulb on it,
Sure.
and then I had my real estate business card because those are easy to get. No offense, like there's a lot of real estate agents in our world, right? And but anyway, I was handing out 2 cards, and whatever landed first. I met this guy named Brian Trachel at a real estate event. He was doing title insurance at the time, and I handed him the card. He says, "Oh, you're a coach too?" And I postured. Are you ready? I postured. I'm like, "Coach, read the card again."
Yeah.
As consultant. I'd made $0.00 as a consultant at that point in my life. And like,
Sure.
there's real estate agents and all the peripheral, all the hands in the real estate professional services cookie jar. They're not hiring consultants, they're hiring coaches. I didn't even know what a coach was.
Right.
Like, what do you mean coach? And I
Right.
postured at first to save face, right? I tell the story in an embarrassing and vulnerable way because I think leaders need to embrace that. And he says, and he starts mentioning all these names, the leaders in personal professional growth space. And I didn't recognize any of them except maybe Tony Robbins, maybe Brian Tracy. I said, oh man, I got to learn this stuff. I got to figure out what this is. And then I realized, well, what if I do figure out what this is? Then I can attach the master's degree in communication and the 8 years experience I had as a headhunter and a recruiter and working with hiring managers and org dev, et cetera. And ooh, maybe that's the adhesive. So I went headfirst into 3 consecutive boot camp coaches trainings, basically on the happenstance inspiration from a guy named Brian Chachel, who's still very near and dear to my heart. He's a really good dude. And all these years later, nearly decades later, I'm still doing it. And that's a practical catalyst to get into coaching is I thought I'd be good at it once I figured out what it was.
Yeah, even though it was somewhat, I don't want to say forced, but sort of evolved through circumstance, right? It's like, hey, there's a demand here. Someone's asking me about it. I better actually learn it, and there's a market
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, not so much of a better. I just, I had to overcome the little discomfort of not knowing,
Right.
right? Vulnerable is not the same thing as threatened.
Sure.
And so once you compartmentalize that little discomfort of vulnerability, then you get curious. What is that? How does what motivation and goal setting and achievement and what? That's a thing? Tell me more.
Right.
And the more I leaned into it, the more I realized that, energetically I needed it, first of all, but then also in terms of my calling, I believe it's what I'm supposed to be doing
Yeah.
is coaching, consulting, training, using my masters and my storytelling, my dynamism, my timing, my empathy to be a good leader in my circles, but also support good leaders.
Yeah, it's funny because I went through a period of transition after leaving the corporate world and becoming an entrepreneur again. And, kind of got to one of those things where like, okay, what do I want to be again? Right. Like I've got to kind of reinvent myself here. And I wasn't
Yeah.
totally happy with the business I had started at the time. And went to my old friend, and I'm not saying like actual friend, but friend in terms of got used to him from his tapes when I was in my 20s, Tony Robbins. I started
Yeah.
going to his seminars and Brian Tracy and some others that you've mentioned. But through that, it's funny because, like you said, you end up sometimes it's the thing you need is this thing you end up then providing to others. So I was going to these seminars, I ended up going to, I'm like, well, if one is good, then after a while, I'm go to another one, then I'll go to another one. After a while, it's like, well, okay, this is kind of my environment. This is where I like to be. I like to learn. I like to grow. And how do I stay in it? And the way to stay in it was to become a leader within it, right? And so, a lot of people are like, well, how did you do that? And I'm like, well, mainly because I didn't want to leave. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't have any God given skill set
It's like, wait,
necessarily
we don't have
for
to
it.
over recruit this guy. He wants to be here.
Yeah.
Give him some responsibility,
Yeah.
quick.
It's like if you want to hang out and you don't want to pay for the material anymore, then you should maybe start teaching it, and I think through that you learn a lot as well, right? I mean, I think when I put the other hat on and go, okay, now it's time for me to communicate this to somebody
Yeah.
else, it really ingrains.
Well, that's the
Um,
best way to learn something is to teach,
yeah.
and I don't know if you're planning, the integrity game. That's the thing that I'm putting out in the world right now, a 10-point model. I wrote this book around it a couple of years back. That's what I've been, looking to be on podcasts to promote that messaging. But it's, you asked like, well, how'd you become a coach? When people say, well, where did the integrity game come about? Same thing. I want more
Yeah.
in my life. I
Yeah.
want to have more integrity. I want to retrofit myself.
Yeah.
Right. So a building bridge or tunnel will crumble under pressure tests without structural integrity. So I believe that so will leaders, teams, and orgs. So then from a soft skills perspective, how do we retrofit ourselves? How do we retrofit our teams so that there's resilience, focus, then we're not all crumbling under pressure tests, especially under blame game and all the dark side of leadership, right? Coercion, force, manipulation, misinformation, all that stuff, right? How do we lead with love, and how do we help people retrofit themselves? So I'm hoping, I'm 2 years into promoting this thing. I've got this 10-point model, but I'm hoping it makes a difference in the world, right? But it started because I want more integrity in my life. I definitely am a fan of retrofitting myself.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about the book a little bit. So it's been out for
Mhm.
a couple of years. Talk to me about that process. It wasn't the first book you wrote, is it?
No, no, no. The first book I wrote was like a tips book. I just created 5 categories, 10 tips in each category, threw an extra 2 tips in the marketing section. So I'd have 52 tips. And it was the purpose of that book was to be online. And, I would go onto Zoom and I would read a tip every week and stream it into social channels. So now I've
Okay.
got something that once a week I can be present, top of mind. It's a reason to email and just it's a legitimate reason to put content and then repurposing of content, of course, as well. So I've done 4 of those now, actually. Get a Clue in 52. Those are called the tips books, and they all have 5 categories and around 10 tips in each category. I've done one for entrepreneurs, coaches, and now the one that I'm reading this year as of the recording is for speakers. But the integrity game is different than all of those books. The integrity game is a parable, and it's golly, it's like a kind of memoir too, and therapeutic because I wrote it after my parents passed. My parents passed 3 weeks apart in pre-vax COVID in September of 2020, and just a month before, I was delivering a virtual keynote, right, for the Specialty Advertising Association of California, and I threw the integrity game in the list of topics for them to choose from just to color up the list, and they chose it, and I'm like, all right, so now all this work I've been doing for 10, 12, 13, 14, whatever many years it was at the time, kind of I was necessity breeds invention. So I put it together in a 10-point model for the keynote. I'm like, wow, this could be a book. Wait, this is just the more I've started thinking about
Right.
it's grown into a thing, and I'm seeing how far it can go. But it's a framework that there's freedom within. It's a 10-point model that shows up as 10 sets of questions. And I'm embarrassed about how simple it is, but it's as easy to understand as it is difficult to play.
Right.
So you play the integrity game. It's metaphorical, but it's like understand the 10 questions. Now answer the 10 questions. Now evaluate your answers to see if they integrate.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to things around integrity and ethics and some of these things that you've really made kind of your life's work, from an academic standpoint,
Mm.
when you talk about these things, no one's going like, oh, wow, that's the first time I've ever heard that. Usually, I'm not talking about specifically about your book, but the idea of like, hey, be the kind of boss you would want to have, right? And create an environment of open dialogue. But the actual execution, like you said, it's as easy to, I forget what you said.
It's as easy to understand as it is difficult to play.
Exactly. And why is it so, why do you think it's so difficult to play for so many people?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. If we've got the time, we can unpack this a little
Yeah.
bit, Ken.
Yeah.
Number one, I mean, we're talking about, well, first of all, just in one ego defense, right? Like, I got a million answers to your question. It could
Hmm.
probably all, because like if I heard a bee by my ear, I wouldn't think about it, right? I wouldn't be like, what's the best way to lead myself out of this situation, right? I would just swat and duck,
Right.
right?
Right.
What are the best practices and the principles of leadership that will avoid the
Right.
I'll just swat and duck and
Right.
instinctually. Well, I'll look and it's a fly instead of a bee. So now I've swatted at or run from a non-threat because I'm hardwired to protect myself. Yeah.
Right.
Well, same thing with information. So ego defense is our sense of self. I'm the leader. I'm the boss. I'm going to make the money. I've had a track record of success. And any information that comes along that is contradicting or potentially threatening my sense of self will provoke a fight or flight response.
Right.
Right. So I don't care if you have the title. I don't care if you have the experience. I don't care how many recommendations you have on your LinkedIn profile. You're still a human being. And so ego defense, first of all. So now when we get to sense of self, right? If we branch out from there, what's fun, yeah, and I try to have fun with this because this is a heavy conversation, Ken, right? So I'll
Right.
ask my audiences when I'm speaking about it, how many of you believe you have integrity? Ego, right? Sense of self. Everybody
Sure.
raises their
Everybody.
hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Then left hand, raise your right hand. And I'll ask everybody, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear not to shoot the messenger.
Right.
Right. Because accountability is always going to feel like an attack when we're not ready to be 100% responsible for our behavior. So people will avoid the accountability conversation for the wrong reasons, but then they'll associate themselves with integrity. But when we peel a couple more layers, what we realize is that integrity and accountability, for that matter, is like parenting or driving, where everybody thinks themselves to be really good at it. It's just everybody else sucks.
Right.
So number one, people associate with themselves with integrity to claim it for themselves. I'm a person of integrity. I have integrity, but they also don't realize consciously that they're using integrity to accuse others of not having it. And isn't that always easier than looking within to increase our own? Right.
Right.
So when it's autobiographical thinking, it's binary. Have it or you don't know. I've got it. Not like I've got some, I need more. How do I
Right.
increase more? How do I get more? The other thing too is that the vibration around integrity is judgment. And that's one of the things that I'm really trying to intervene on is, is that when I ask people, what is integrity? Right? We're always going to get two answers, Ken. Always, always, always. It doesn't matter where the audience is in the country or the world and how many people are in the audience or what the profession. Always two answers. Number one is be your word or some version of be your word. Do what you say you're going to do. Right? So we pin that on the board when I'm doing this on my feet in person. And then the other is do the right thing when nobody's watching. Right? Do the same thing when nobody's watching as you would when right?
Right.
So those are judgments, right? You didn't do the right thing. You weren't your word. Right? So we judge other people when they're out of integrity, but we claim it for ourselves. And you follow? So
Yes.
right. And the thing is, those answers are good, but they're not enough. Right. So in other words, I like be your word because there's an integration, integrating word with behavior. So that's cool. And I like do the same thing when nobody's watching as somebody's watching, right? Because there's an integration there too, behavior with moral compass. Okay. And the other thing I like about those two answers is that behavior is the evidence in both equations. Behavior is the evidence of our integrity, right? So number one, value neutral. It's not good or bad or right or wrong. Like I'm holding the pen, I'm not holding the pen. It's just an objective observation. It's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's not a judgment, right?
Right.
It's not an ego defense or an othering, if you will. and it's together or not together. That matches this or it doesn't. Okay, but people's ego defense, they don't even want to admit when they didn't do what they said they were going to do, but they'll spring loaded to attack because we're always projecting.
Well,
The things that bother us in other people are the stuff that we know to be guilty about ourselves, right?
right, right. And it seems like the ultimate judge of integrity is ourselves.
Yes.
So we're grading our own paper. So it seems like if we want to live from
I love that.
true integrity, we've got to have a really high sense of self-awareness, I would think.
100%.
And self-accountability.
100%. That's what we're talking about. That's why I call it the integrity game rather than the 100% self-accountability game.
Right.
Because one will provoke a resistance, the other will provoke a raise their hand.
Right.
So I'm a big fan in the joviality. I'm a big fan in humor. I'm a big fan of fast-paced, humor-laced, and in your face. I'm a big fan of storytelling and dynamism and humor and vulnerability as a Trojan horse.
Right.
To get our attention focused on, right? How many of you have integrity? Everybody's going to raise their hand, or at least I got them into the conversation this far. Now let's see how further I can take it, right?
Right.
Because the truth is, if I said I was, yeah. So you're right. Back to this other thing. Do the right thing when who says what the right thing is?
Right.
Right. So what most people do is to say you don't have integrity or they don't have integrity or the world needs more integrity, but they're coming from an autobiographical place, projecting their own definition for right and wrong onto everybody else. Expectation then becomes the quickest road to disappointment. Right. But what people aren't saying is, hey, here's what my values, morals, and ethics are, and I'm inviting the world to hold me accountable to these things.
Right.
What people do is they keep those things inside their head and then they hold the rest of the world accountable to it. So let's communicate. Let's talk about it. Let's answer the questions. Let's get it on paper. It's not for me to tell you what the right thing or the wrong thing is, but if you tell me what you think the right or wrong thing is, and you invite me to ask you about that, if your behavior steps out of line with what you've told me, then maybe we'll get somewhere. Maybe we'll retrofit a little bit. So we can't even agree on who the president is, or we can't even agree on what the facts are,
right.
Do you follow? So you're going to tell me we're going to agree on right and wrong?
Right.
Like you never lie unless there's elf on a shelf, then lie to your kids for 26 days to guilt them into good behavior. I mean, this is the moving target and it's context specific, right or wrong, good or bad, clean or dirty, right? The toughest decisions that leaders face probably have 16 different conflicting success principles and moral principles that need to be brought into balance, in order to make the right decision, right?
Right.
So sometimes fools rush in, sometimes we who hesitate are lost. Right. Sometimes if I never quit, I never lose. Sometimes I better know when to cut my losses. So what's the right thing in every given? So I'm just sitting in a binary position saying, look, I have it and the rest of the world doesn't. And I'm going to point my finger and suggest why. No, that's not going to work. We need to intervene. We need to wedge bust that and break it up a little bit. And we can do it with love and we can do it non-threatening and we can have fun with it. And it can be playful and it's soft skills.
Right.
But you're 100% right. What most people do is they avoid answering the tough questions about their own life and then sit in judgment about other people's behaviors without asking them anywhere near tough questions about their own life. You know what I mean? So that's what's in the way.
Well, it's like, mutual respect is mutual, right? I mean, it's a two-way street. And if you're not giving it, if you're not being vulnerable, you're not going to get vulnerable. If you're not, caring about people, they're not going to care about you long term. They may care about their paycheck for a little while, but that's not a long term thing. And I had a CEO once. I'm going to tell you a story. So I had a CEO. I was with a large company, and this was early in my career with them. And I was doing a location visit. I had just been promoted, and I was overseeing a few locations, and I had no idea he was going to be there. I mean, this is a 45,000 employee company, and I'm at a 30-person location. So the odds of him being there like almost none. But he happened to be there. There were two businesses in the same unit. I oversaw one. He was actually visiting the other one, and we ran into each other. I had met him before, and he said, "Oh, hey, what are you down for?" I said, "I'm doing a check in with my GM down here. Seeing how they're doing." And he said, "Hey, do you mind if I sit in?" And I said, "No, you're the CEO. What am I going to say?" Right. So he comes in and he sits down, and we went through our location visit. I did it the way I normally would. And it went well, and it was good. And then he shared with me afterwards, he said, every time I meet someone for the first time, I give them this. And it was really interesting. I think so many times as leaders, we sit down with someone and we say, here are my expectations of you, the employee, right? Here are my expectations of you, my subordinate. Here's what I's you need to dot, T's you need to cross, sales number you need to hit, whatever it is, hiring quotas. He actually had a form that was all about the stuff that they needed to hold him accountable to. And I still have it. I still give it to candidates in our recruiting firm. I'll pull it up here in a second, but it has things like you know, the corporate office is here to support, not to block. I'm here to. I will judge my. I took his leadership style because that's what it was called, my leadership style, and I stole shamelessly, but then created my own. So it has some of my own stuff, but it was sort of like, we're here to support you, not to block you. You're the one running the race. We're the ones here providing the Gatorade. You know what I mean? We're not going to walk past ethical issues, nor are we going to hide from our own. And it was all this stuff. And he was like very serious about like, call me out when you see this, and we started operating from that premise in my group and really trying to, listen, it's a moving target, right? I mean, it's you're never batting 1,000 in this, but I think it certainly upgraded our level of integrity, I think, with each other and with our frontline people.
Well, yeah, it's again back to vulnerable. It's not the same thing as threatened, and it's as easy to understand it. You really have to now back to repetition of communication. Like repetition is so key. So you have to constantly re-emphasize how safe it is, how psychological safe or right people are to call out. Right, if you see something, say something. A lot of times that's a trap, right? In other organizations that vibrate differently, and yeah, it comes down to the vulnerability, right? Leaders go first.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so tell me, I mean, how, when you released the book, what was it like writing it, first of all? Because I know you had done your other ones, but they weren't as intense, right? In terms of the effort. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the process was therapeutic. It was pre-vax COVID when I lost my parents, and I'd given the keynote, and I decided that I was going to write the book because the 10-point model, it's set up good. Just let me put an intro chapter, a concluding chapter, and then one chapter for each of the 10 points on the model. We'll get, a mentor and a mentee, and they'll meet through some story, and the mentor figure, who I'll seed plant with things that I do in my career, will meet the uninspired hot dog vendor. Right. And by the end of the game, the guy won't be slinging dogs anymore. And let's create some plot twists and some other characters, etc. So we set it to baseball. My son, my firstborn, is a baseball player on scholarship right now at San Diego State. So baseball's always been a big thing. And, the season ticket holder is sitting there watching his son, the rookie who just made the big league squad. And he's the tying run, in the 9th inning, and the hot dog vendor's like, "Oh, extra innings. I don't want to go into extra innings. I have plans tonight." And first, the Papa Bear ego defense, like, "Hey, that's my son." Second of all, what are you complaining? They just reads this guy to be a complainer. Right. "Oh, my section sucks. I'm not making money. The boss, the fan. Oh, it's just baseball." That we put all this dialogue in this guy, right? Because we've all been there, right? Where it's so easy to complain about everything else going on rather than do anything about yourself. So we can all relate to this hot dog vendor, I hope. And so the character that's modeled after me takes the hot dog vendor through, and they get to go on this journey through the 10-point model. So it introduces the 10-point model, right? And there's the baseball player is infused with characters or qualities of my first son. There's a cotton candy sales person, counter to the hot dog, right? Who's got qualities, all the qualities of my daughter. And then at the end, there's a doctor who didn't get to play because he had a condition with his leg. So he's all about, raising money for challenged athletes at the end. And so I infused the qualities of my 3 children, because after, losing my parents, like, what if I get hit by a bus,
Sure.
So I kind of wanted some legacy. I wanted some memoir. I wanted to, I was going down memory lane a little bit with some of the storytelling that was done, but also this model is coming out of me, this 10-point model, is from somewhere, like source, right?
Yeah.
It's the combination of all the work I've done in my career, or I don't know how to, some of it's unexplainable, and I was right. It's a wave I was riding, but it was therapeutic and it was intentional. And I'm just trying to integrate my own therapy and my own memoir, my own legacy, my own career and a future. Because I've got every reason to believe the integrity game can live and breathe inside of academia, inside of, progressive organizations, that it is the soft skill version of structural integrity for individuals, teams. And, this is what I believe. This is what I'm trying to step into and see where I can go with it.
Yeah, I think, going back to what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, where it's, easy to understand, tough to do. And, you know, I wish more people would try it. Like, try being vulnerable, try just owning your mistakes, right? A little bit more in a more public way. We screw up every day. I mean, if you're in a leadership role, you're making dozens of decisions. I mean, if you get 70% of them right, like, you're doing great. You know what I mean? Which means you messed a lot of stuff up during the day. And um, a constant kind of ownership of that, where it makes it okay to like try and fail, right? And it makes it okay to, and it doesn't mean I think the old way, like a generation ago, maybe, where it was, leaders don't really show weakness, and, maybe a lot more managing through fear and job security and stuff like that. None of that's flying anymore. People have choices. And I think the pandemic only heightened that, not just because of remote work, but because of people actually having enough downtime, like you did, to go, what's important to me, right? Life's too short. I don't want to work for someone I don't like, or somebody that doesn't respect me, right? So it's become like really, really essential, and you're starting to see people without the emotional IQ, really, they're becoming dinosaurs pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know how to comment so much. I'm maybe not the best person to comment on the generational differences, like how the boomers are approaching their careers now post-COVID versus Gen X's and millennials and so forth. I think it's an interesting conversation. Uh, but yeah, the time to reflect is important, and that's one of the things that the integrity game asks us to do.
Right.
Is it's like here's the funny part. Like, you can try to laugh because it's a heavy conversation, right, Ken? Like, imagine all right, how many of you have integrity, right? And
Right.
imagine like 100 hands going up. Okay, great. So then all of you write down on a piece of paper, what is your purpose in life, and pass it forward. People will be looking around at each other.
Sure.
You understand?
Yeah.
Oh, what a purpose? Oh, I haven't thought about that. You just raised your hand. You said have integrity,
Right.
right? So purpose is the first question. Or Simon Sinek would say, start with why. But what's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of, why does life exist at all? Do you have any thoughts around that? Right? Because if not, you may not cherish, optimize, invest in life, right? But what's the meaning of life? Any thought leadership in your life at all? And then what's the meaning of your life? Right? What's the
Right.
meaning of the company? What's the meaning of this project? What's the meaning of the team? So purpose, always start with purpose, 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 right? But a lot of people are just going transactionally all the time without tethering their transactions to something transformational. What's the purpose of all of this? My wife, I love her, but she's corporate. And so many times it's like, I need to, I have to. The language, that's just the automatic language.
Right.
And sometimes I'll joke with her a little bit. I'll say, which one of your arms is going to automatically fall off if you don't do that right now?
Right.
And
Right.
there's no answer to it. But we're using the word need. What's the purpose of it, right? So we're not tethered to purpose, but we're flailing around accusing other people, right? And then
Right.
gifts. What are our gifts? What's God-given, man-made, self-generated? What are our competitive advantages? Are we optimizing our gifts or suffocating our gifts? Like, from behavioral style, right? Instinctual behavioral style to motivators to talents, and or what do we want to be gifted at, right? What's our mindset around giving and receiving, right? All those are all the gifts is the second point on the model, and all of those questions, and then potential, vision, mission, objectives. So if I've got this purpose and I've got these gifts, now I could start to imagine a potential
Right.
where vision's farthest out. I could see, what do I see? Mission is like an accomplishment that proves I'm on my way to that vision. And now annual objectives that get me towards the mission, right? And then I can break it down into quarterly goal setting and get really specific and measurable. And then I can get strategies, tactics, and resources, because Robin says success leaves clues. So anything I want to achieve, somebody's done it already. And right. And then it's
Sure.
all about my commitment. Then it's about my action taking. Then it's about my willingness to learn. Then it's about my accumulation of accomplishment. Then it's about who I'm serving, my awareness of who I'm serving, who wins when I win. So I just gave a 10-point rundown of the integrity game, the 10-point model. That's it in a
Right.
nutshell. And so it's treating those 10 points like questions, slowing down, having the time to answer those questions, and then making sure our answers go together rather than dilute or fight with each other.
Right.
And then being willing to share our answers with our team, above or below us, and then being willing held accountable to those answers, or updating those answers and making sure those answers are current. right?
Well,
So
I have to think like
yeah.
this kind of culture, like if it's in a business and you're going through these 10 points, it's got to have almost a spiral staircase kind of effect because you're going up, you go up to another level, and now you've kind of embodied the principles of this and made it part of who your organization is. So it becomes easier to kind of keep that going. Like you've got that momentum.
Yeah, I love, like, I don't know if you saw me smile and breathe because, like I got enamored with your interpretation there. Yeah, it's a freedom within a framework. It's
Yeah.
self-contained, but it keeps going. You
Yes.
answer it, but you update your answers. Yeah, I explained the 10 points in a certain order, but they're all points of entry into the party. So if I'm
Right.
coaching somebody, we're going to knock on door number 4, goal setting. And that's where we're going to start. And then if they come into the coaching relationship after, you know what I mean, then it's like, all right, now let's fill in the rest of the questions. But if I go in and do a soft skill training program, it's a different point of entry into the integrity game party. So the 10 points on the model, right? And so the visual that I do on my keynote on my PowerPoint is shoelaces, right? So if you imagine a tennis shoe, you get, the hook, you put the string through it, diagonal, 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 and you cinch it up, right? So the
Right.
laces are not tying the shoe. We tie the laces. What the
Right.
laces are doing is they're
Bringing it
integrating and
together. Yeah.
giving it structural integrity. And so now 5 points on one side, 5 points on the other side. And that's what they are: purpose, gifts, potential, goals, strategies, word and commitment, um, taking action, proactive learning, accumulation of accomplishment, and service. Those are the 10 points on the model. So the laces, then the adhesive is this vulnerability and this love that we're talking about, leading with love rather than coercion, manipulation, and so forth. So leaders, right? It's really good when somebody says, hey, this is what the organization needs. Here are the KPIs, here are the measures, here are the metrics, here's what I need you to do. This is the job, do the job.
Right.
When I'm recruiting like apprentices or interns, I love mentoring young people. I say, hey, what do you want to put on your resume in 3 months? They go, huh? They're just waiting for me to tell them what to do and hope they can get good at it enough to get noticed and get an opportunity. But they haven't stopped and done. Hang on, slow down, take a deep breath. Let's future pace 91 days from now. What do you want to put on your resume? Because if you can tell me that, then it's my job to give you the software and the hardware, the content and the access to software to like create all of that. And if it's good, we'll use it.
Right.
Right. But I'm here to mentor you and I need to know what you want in your resume. And if you don't have any answers to that, I can start assigning things to you, but I'm going to check in with you next week, check in with you the week after. You
I,
got any
I,
of your own ideas yet?
I
Right.
have to tell you, I fell into this like completely accidentally, maybe a tiny bit of intuition, a tiny bit, but this was a long time ago, also early when I was on the corporate side instead of the entrepreneurial side. And a large company had just bought my smaller company. I've told this story on the podcast, but it's been at least a year, so I'll tell it again. But
And
um,
statute of limitations is good. You're
yeah,
good.
it's half the audience is new probably. So, um, but anyway, I had a small company, like 6 employees, and it got bought by a big company, and they integrated my location with a bunch of others, and then had me, run them. And so we all of a sudden went from being like 6 to like I don't know 20 to then very quickly like 30 or 40, and it was all happening. You could measure this in weeks, not even months, right? And my leadership style, which was very hands-on and very much being invested in everybody because I could. It was small, and I
Yeah.
knew their kids, I knew their outcomes, I knew what they wanted personally, and things were going well from a business standpoint. We were hitting our numbers, everything was going good. Morale was generally good too, but I was starting to feel this disease of like I don't know half the people in this building anymore. Like I really have no idea why they're here. I don't know what their motivations are.
Mm.
And really out of that level of discomfort and convenience, sort of, I was like, okay, had everybody come into the office. Let's go into the meeting room. And I just owned it. And I was like, a month ago, I felt like I knew everybody in this building. I knew what you wanted. I knew how to lead you. And it's gotten away from me, and there's not enough other leaders in the building to help me shore that up yet because we haven't done a great job of prepping
Right.
for all of
Yeah.
you. And so we're going to work on that. In the meantime, this is on a Friday. In the meantime, I want you to go home. I want you to write down for me what you would like to accomplish over the next, make it whatever time frame you want, but no longer than a year. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't care if it's personally or professionally. So it could be like, I want to
Yeah.
buy a ski boat by next year. Okay, that's fine. I want to be promoted into a leadership job, and then okay, cool. I want to make 20,000 more. Okay, I don't care, whatever it is, just something. And I want you to tell me why you want that, and I want you to write it down in handwriting and turn those into me. And that way, I'll have a better idea who you are. And then over the course of the next week or 2 weeks, we'll do 15 to 30 minutes one-on-one with all of you guys, and I want to hear more about this and how we can help you get there. And oh my God, it became awesome, because when you understand, to your point, where someone wants to go instead of where you want them to go, but where they want to go, where they naturally want to go, and you can somehow bring in also what your corporate objectives are, right? Also, what, like, you can and should tie the two together. So the person that wants to, it's a material object, so I know it's easy, but like the boat, okay, how much does the boat cost? How much are the payments? How much of the insurance? How often do you want to be on it? And we could do this for non-tangible things too, work-life balance, whatever, right? But in this case, it was um, let's sit down then and figure out the things that you need to do from a work standpoint to get there, whatever that is, right? And is that what you want to do? And is that how you want me to coach you? And I know this isn't exactly what you're saying, but it reminded me of that, where it was so powerful to, instead of assigning people
Yes.
their objective, let them choose it. And of course, weave that into what the corporation needs, weave that into what the company needs, right?
Integrate.
But
You're playing
yeah,
the integrity game. That's it.
yeah, that's
Like
the
if
laces.
yeah, back to what you said earlier. If you listen to enough, I don't know if you listen enough to Tony Robbins, but I think it comes from Tony Robbins. Have you ever done this exercise where two people put their hands together, like you put your hands in front of your face together like this? And
Sure.
have you ever done the deal where you got, on the count of three, you have to push as hard as you can onto one hand with the other? Have you ever done this?
Yes. Yep.
Right. And so 1, 2, 3, and people are like this, and their hands are stuck in front of their face. And then the leader says, I didn't say push back.
Right.
Right. So should we go like that?
Right.
Right. But people are like, ugh. And the magic of that exercise is that we are telling our hand to push, 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 push. We don't even need to give a conscious instruction to the resist hand. The resistance is automatic for anything that feels pressed upon.
Right.
And so as leaders, we must know that as institutions are pressing
You're going to get
its
pressed back.
objectives, there's going to be, even not maybe not consciously, like, ooh, I want to push back on my institution right now. It's just ego defensive. It's just a
Right.
natural equal, right? So we have to account for that,
Right.
right? And so instead, what you're talking about is, if the very first accountability on the job, if I'm your leader, and the very first accountability is not what my institution wants you to do, not what the shareholders, not what my boss, not what the stakeholders, not what the cross-functional boundary spanners.
Right. Right.
Right? Are you with me? Right?
Right.
We'll talk about them in due time. Okay. But the first accountability isn't what any of them want. If I'm your leader, the number one accountability is you knowing what you want
Right.
and you being able to tell me what you want. And then I'll be able to tell you if there's an intersection
Yeah.
between what the institution wants and what you want. Then we'll know if this is a fit. I'll
Right.
be able to tell you if you can get what you want here.
Right. Well, and what becomes even more powerful is the next step in that. Like, let's say someone said, well, what I want to do is I want to become a leader in the company and I want to do it within 12 months. And I'd say that's great. I actually, from what I've seen, I think you have that potential. And we can create a plan that says, in the, let's reverse engineer it. If 12 months is the goal, then in 9 months, maybe we're here. In 6 months, maybe we have you running team meetings. And in 3 months, you've got to be leading as an individual contributor. Would you like me to manage you towards those expectations? Because that's a lot different than the job that you're in right now. And
Yes.
they're like, oh, okay. Like, if they really want it, they'll go, okay, but they got to actually think about that, because
Yeah.
they're giving me permission to hold them essentially to a higher standard, because it's their standard, not mine. Right. And I can't tell you how many times and I didn't want to use it to the point where they regretted doing the exercise, but I had all those handwritten notes in my top left-hand drawer of my desk. And when I saw behavior that was inconsistent with what they told me they wanted to be over time, I'm not talking about any little minor infraction. I'm just saying, let's say the guy that wants to be the manager is now late for the second time in the same week and everybody knows it. I
Yeah.
just say, hey, Scott, can you come on in for a minute? Sure. Hey, man, how's it going? Let's have a little update on where you are with, where you're trying to get. I think you said right here you wanted to be a service manager within the next 12 months. Is that still the thing? He's like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, which thing do you want to change? Your outcome or your behavior? right?
Right.
Because they're no longer intersecting,
Yeah.
right?
It's
Like I
out of
think you,
integrity.
right,
And if we don't, and look, this isn't a judgment. I
right,
just need to, we agreed, I have permission from you
exactly,
to share this with you. And if something's missing, I need you to update your word or correct your behavior. But for me to allow the out of integrity to exist is going to invite everything else to be out of integrity also.
exactly. Because you said you wanted me to coach you. It's like
Yeah.
if you wanted to run a 5 minute mile and you're not doing the stuff you need to do to get there, and yet as your coach, I'm just going, looks good, and you're like, that's not, no, I hired you to get me to 5 minute mile, which sometimes means reminding me of when I'm off track, right? Reminding me
Right.
when I need to train more.
That's what we're talking about. The entirety of what we're talking about is accountability.
Right.
The biggest problem with accountability is that everybody wants everybody else to be accountable, but they're not the biggest fans of being accountable themselves. The ones that are, wow, it's there's a big disconnect between those that are willing to be accountable, willing to lead, willing to be vulnerable, willing to own their stuff, you working on the soft skills to be able to find the communication frameworks to, deliver hardcore accountability on a plate of I love you.
Yeah.
And we're fighting through, automatic hardwired ego defense, and it's a tough game.
Right.
So I'm hoping the integrity game helps. It creates this 10-point thing, and instead of me looking at you and you've got your, no, let's look at these 10 questions and let me just guide you and let me support you on answering these 10 questions, and let's get clarity on these are your answers. Okay, how often would you like to update this to make sure everything is cool? What kind of permission do I have you? Do you want to meet regularly, or do you prefer the random? Or talk to me about the permission that I have to hold you accountable to your answers.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love it because I mean, again, it's their answers. It's them giving you permission to be a coach, and God, it's so much different. It's so much more powerful than just saying like, I need you to hit the number that I want you to hit for no
Well,
apparent
and
reason.
then yeah, what I wrote down when it's like, oh, leapfrog dreams. Oh, wait, you want to be the leader in 12 months.
Right.
So they're just leapfrogged all the way to status title,
Yeah.
but they wait, hang on. Did you pay attention to avoiding your own performance improvement plan on the way to being a
Sure.
leader?
Sure. Yep.
Did you pay attention to, it's kind of funny, right? Oh,
Yeah.
leapfrog dreams. Because I
Yeah.
see a lot of people are like, oh, I want to be a speaker because they want the picture and the lights and the stage and they want the accolades. But do you know what it takes to be a speaker and write speeches and practice speeches and get hired and booked as a speaker? Leapfrog dreamers. It's fun. Leapfrog
Yeah.
leaders.
And
Leapfrog leaders.
if it's not too crazy, I'll still go with it, right? Like if it's like, well, that's okay, that's possible, but that's
Yeah,
a
because
whole
yeah.
different level of stepping up, right?
Well,
That's a
that's
whole
what we do
different
in the
level of
goal setting
accountability.
is we screen for achievability, right?
Yeah.
Number one, is it humanly possible? Number two, is it possible in this context? Number three, can you do it? Do you believe
Right.
you can?
Right. And are you willing to do the stuff that it's going to
It's like
take to get
12 months. Well, in our organization, leaders have to have a minimum of 3 years of leadership experience. So you're not going to be able to get there in 12 months, but here's the farthest you can get in 12 months on that track.
Sure.
Those sorts of things. Yeah, we got to, yeah.
No, very cool. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for coming on. A couple of last things I'd like to talk to
Sure.
you about. So, first of all, because you're teaching, you've got your book to promote, you're doing a podcast. I mean, I'm curious, like, what's a week in your life? Because it sounds like you probably value freedom quite a bit, or
Yeah.
flexibility anyway. What does a week in your life look like these days?
Yeah, it will. During the semester, the 2 days that look the same or similar are the 2 days that I go to campus to teach some classes, right?
Sure.
Then it could be totally different. It's
Right.
dynamic. Sometimes I'm doing networking, in town. I'm a member of Provisors this year. Last year I was VP of communication for the Professional Coaches Alliance in my service time there. Sometimes I'm a supporting coach. My coach Jefrrey brand, is independently contracted to be a supporting coach or content speaker at other people's events
Okay.
sometimes. A lot of work from the home office. It is flexible. It is diverse. There's very very few weeks look the same, right?
Yeah.
Like in a couple of weeks as of this recording, I'm going to be in Cancun for 4 nights, supporting a bunch of chiropractors that are going to learn how to market their businesses, right? And so they can focus on the leadership that they can focus on as chiros, and maybe automate some of their marketing, right? So it's different. It's different every week. That's one of the things I really appreciate, back to the beginning of our conversation, is that my backstory is my present story.
Yeah.
Is that San Diego State is the vertebrae for me. It is the epicenter of so much of my identity, so much of my gratitude. It's so wonderful to be on campus every day now and see, smell 9 years worth of memories while I'm creating brand new experiences in this moment.
Sure.
And so I like having San Diego State as a real stable, immovable, structural, integral part of my identity. And then my weeks could be as diverse as anything. But this
Yeah,
identity
that's
of
home.
yeah, Professor Klubeck at home and 2 days a week at San Diego State University, especially while my son's there and just being in the Aztec culture and all of that's wonderful. So I don't know, I have a better answer for you, but no 2 weeks look the same except for when I'm on campus teaching classes, helping young people.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on here and teaching us a little bit more about integrity. It's been a great talk. Please let me know if I can ever be of service to you. And I hope our paths cross again.
I'm sure they will, Ken. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, sir. Take care.